Yo, what's going on? My name is Kofuzi and I'm a non-elite runner who reviews running shoes on YouTube and travels the world to run. And these kinds of videos where I do a marathon guide or breakdown tend to get really long, so let's jump right into it. The first thing that I do want to talk about though is a little bit of a disclaimer on this video. I went to Australia for the first time to run the Sydney Marathon, so I'm not a Sydney expert. I'm not even an expert on the course that I'm about to tell you about. But as someone who traveled to Australia for the first time to run this course for the first time, I had to figure out a lot of the things that you guys who are about to go to Australia for the first time to run this marathon for the first time are trying to figure out. So hopefully I'll be able to answer all the questions that you have. Let's get started. First, where to stay. Before you even get to Australia, you're going to need to book a hotel room. And I did use a travel group in order to facilitate a lot of these details. So a lot of this stuff isn't stuff that I discovered or did the legwork on. I'm just telling you what we did and how that worked out for me. So for where to stay, I think you should think about where the finish line is, the Opera House, where the expo is, that's Darling Harbour, and a spot that's walkable to each of those is the CBD, or I believe that stands for Central Business District. It doesn't give you perhaps the most authentic flavor of what Sydney is really like for people that live in Sydney. So you're not living like a local in the CBD, but it is an area with really good access to public transportation, lots of convenience stores so you could pick up all your runner snacks, and lots of other places to eat and things to do and see. So it's a very convenient location to stay at. Plus there are a ton of hotels. Now, when you're getting to the airport, the main thing that I want to point out to you guys is that getting through customs is relatively quick compared to some of the other travel that I've done. I'd say for the most part, it took me about 45 minutes to get through customs. And of course, I was coming in on a really big airplane with a lot of other people and a lot of other flights landing at the same time for marathon weekend. Keep in mind, Australia is really strict about their border control in terms of things like food. So if you have seeds or nuts or dried fruits, you're going to have to declare them. My recommendation would be to avoid bringing those things over. I know some of you may have special dietary needs, so you can't help it. In that situation, you are going to have to declare it. I think you'll probably be allowed to bring a lot of your kind of like packaged foods in, but you are going to want to declare that, and you don't want to get caught up not declaring something that you should have. They take it very seriously over there. Once you get through customs, the first thing that I did was I changed currency. That's something that I've been doing a lot more lately because as I've been traveling, some of the places that I go to either don't take credit cards everywhere, like in some of the places that I'm used to, or sometimes it's just a lot easier and faster to use cash. But I found that in Australia, pretty much everywhere takes credit card. I really wouldn't worry about changing currencies that much unless you just really enjoy looking at foreign currencies, which I kind of do. Now, in terms of getting from the airport to the hotel, I would say if you're staying in the CBD, then the easiest and probably the fastest way to get there is by using the trains. Sydney has, in my estimation, a very efficient and a very robust public transportation system. You're going to take the T train. It's a long walk to get from kind of like international arrivals. You have to walk pretty much across the entire airport to get to where the trains are. But once you do, it is a very short ride, and the public transportation system in Sydney is very easy to ride. If you have a credit card, you're just going to tap in, and also don't forget to tap out. In terms of what you're going to pack and weather-wise for Sydney, if the race doesn't change when it is during the year, and for 2025, it was August 31st was race day, so pretty much end of August, beginning of September. That's winter for Sydney, but I guess it's like winter in air quotes because Sydney to me felt a lot more kind of like San Diego in the wintertime. It also is another city on a bay, so there was a lot of kind of familiarity to me between those two cities, and I feel like that's probably the closest thing that I can compare in terms of American city and what to expect in terms of winter. Now, when we arrived, we had just absolutely gorgeous weather, and it was quite similar to some unseasonably cool weather we had been experiencing here in the Midwest. I'm in Crystal Lake, Illinois. And so for me in the mornings, I was running in shorts, and a t-shirt or a long sleeve shirt would be fine. In the evenings, I wanted to wear pants and a hoodie. And during the day, when it was hot, pants and a t-shirt were plenty. But always pack in layers, because if you get into the shade, it cools off quite a bit, and depending on what you're doing, you may want to have a jacket with you, like if you're going out on the water and taking a harbor cruise. Race day temperatures were in the low 50s in the morning when we were getting there, so it was a little bit chilly. I probably could have used a thin layer of gloves for while I was waiting for the race to start, but just regular throwaway layers were plenty for me. I didn't feel the need to bring like a winter cap, although I did see a handful of those floating around. Now, in terms of food or where to eat, I'd say when you're in the CBD where I was, there's a lot of stuff that's very convenient, a lot of food courts and malls and stuff like that. My hotel was right on George Street, which seems to be a very busy main artery. That's where the light rail runs through, but also that's where there's a lot of foot traffic and also restaurants, especially as you go further south away from the water and away from the Opera House. That's where you start to see a lot of restaurants, a lot of nightlife. If you go closer to the water, there's a lot of like touristy stuff that's there that's decent. It's going to be kind of overpriced, but for people who have a little bit more sensitive stomachs and are looking for safer options for when they're traveling, some of that touristy stuff is going to be just perfect for you. Plus, it's going to be on the water. It's going to be gorgeous. So you're paying more, but you're probably going to like what's there. The main thing that I would really recommend for people to try is flat whites. Sydney is one of the places that claims that they invented the flat white. It's my favorite coffee drink even before I got to Sydney, and it's super delicious to have while there. Locals there also recommended to me to have a lamington. It's a cake. I went to Flower and Stone to get mine, and it was really nice and lovely. There are convenience stores and grocery stores in the CBD, so you'll be able to get plenty of the snacks and drinks that you are used to. Now, in terms of some activities, I'm not going to make your itinerary for you. It depends on whatever you want to do, what your interests are, but some things that I think are must-do activities, stuff that I'm really thankful that I was able to do, and I feel like I would have missed out had I not been able to do them in retrospect. One is to do some sort of harbor tour. Sydney is a city on a bay. There's so much coastline. It's so gorgeous there. You're going to want to be able to see it from the water. Plus, it's a good way to see a lot of it while you'll be able to sit down and be off your feet. I did it by going on a lunch cruise, a 3-hour tour that was set up by my tour group. But another way that you could do it is by taking one of the many ferries. The ferries will take you right from like by the Opera House. They'll take you to a beach. It can take you to the zoo, which if you're bringing kids with you, I'd highly recommend that. My friend Ben brought his family to Australia. They took a ferry to go to the zoo. It looks super awesome. I really regret that I couldn't go with them on that day, because I think that would have been my chance to see a kangaroo in Australia, and I didn't go and I didn't get to see a kangaroo. The other thing that I'd highly recommend is going to Bondi Beach. It's a world famous beach. It's got this very famous pool that is right along the beach that the waves crash up and over and get into the pool. And there's lots of surfers there. It's wintertime, so you're not really going to want to be diving into the water, but I had never set foot in the South Pacific Ocean before, so that was something that I was very happy to be able to do. Now, when you're there early, you're going to want some places to run, and I have 3 places that I would recommend. One, you're going to want to run around the Opera House. There is a path that you could take through the Botanical Garden that will take you right along the water, give you wonderful views of the Opera House and Harbor Bridge. The other thing that I would recommend is running across Harbor Bridge. Again, you'll get really nice views of the city. The bridge itself is a major commuting artery, so it's not the best smelling place to be running when there's all sorts of commuters that are on there, but the views are certainly worth it. And then the third place that I would recommend running is Centennial Park. That's a place where I think a lot of locals get in a lot of their miles. A lot of cycling also happens through there as well. That's a really fun place, I think, to run. Keep in mind that all 3 of the places that I mentioned, you are going to be running pretty much directly on during the race itself, but you might want to get a little bit of a preview, and those are some popular places where I saw a lot of runners while I was in Sydney. All right, now let's talk about getting to the expo. And I think there's two main things that you're going to want to watch out for, especially if this is your first international race. First is you got to bring your passport. Now, we're all used to like bringing a driver's license for ID to confirm who we are when we are going to races at home, but abroad, you're gonna have to bring your passport with you. A lot of times people will go to the expo after doing touristy stuff all day, and it might not occur to you immediately that you need to bring your passport when you are leaving your hotel room in the morning. But if you're gonna go to the expo later in the day, when you leave your hotel, bring that passport with you. And the other thing is that there isn't race morning bag drop. You've got to drop off your bags at the expo. And so you're gonna wanna bring anything that you're gonna put in your drop bag to the expo with you. When you get there, when you pick up your bib, you will get a bag that you could put that in, the clear plastic bag, and then you could drop it off there. So if you don't want to make 2 trips to the expo, then you're gonna have to bring all your bag drop stuff with you when you go. Now, in terms of picking up your bib, for me, it was the fastest experience. It was super efficient. Everything was very smooth in terms of getting through the line to get your bib. I had to wait 0 amount of time. And then the rest of the expo was a little bit more of the kind of standard expo experience. People these days, and I think it's been a trend, it's been happening ever since kind of like the pandemic lifted, is that like the race merch, people go crazy over it, and just like it's always kind of a disaster in the apparel section. Hopefully we can all collectively demand better from ourselves and each other in terms of behaving when it comes to shopping at the expo. But once you kind of get through finding the product you want to buy, the lines actually were very well organized at the Sydney Marathon Expo. So kudos to them for that. The line was very long, but it moved very quickly. So it was a lot shorter than it looked time-wise. The rest of the expo was kind of on the smaller side. The booth setups kind of remind me a lot of what you see in London in terms of how they're physically constructed and kind of the dimensions and sizes of them. And if you've been to an international World Marathon Major, it's kind of like a lot of the similar type of stuff is there at the expo. But it is worth taking a lap through the rest of the expo to kind of just see what all is going on through there. Now let's move ahead to race day morning. I was in wave 1, and wave 1 opened at 5 a.m. Now to get to the starting line, the easiest way to get there is by taking the train. If you're in the CBD like I was and my friend Ben was, we were in different hotels. We met up, walked over to the train, waited for a train, got on, took the train, and arrived all in less than 15 minutes. We got off at Crow's Nest. I think you can also get off at Victoria Cross, depending on which color you are. I was green. My friend Ben was, I think, orange or red or some other color, but he just got off at my station so we could walk over together. And then once we got to like the color sections area, that's when we just split off. And there is a long walk after you get off the train though. I would say it's probably as long as the train ride in terms of duration. It took about 15 minutes to get from the train station to my green wave area. But don't worry, there's gonna be tons of other people, so you can follow everyone else, you won't get lost. And let's say you are kind of at the front of the train and you're the first ones out, there's a lot of volunteers along the way to make sure that you won't get lost. So I really appreciated that little bit of hospitality from the Sydney Marathon race organizers. But I would say budget at least 30 minutes of time to get from your hotel to where you can enter your waves if you are in the green wave. Now the temps were chilly that morning. I had kind of like joggers on the bottom and then a very thin jacket up top. And I felt like that was enough for me in terms of what I wanted to wear. I would say because there's no race day morning bag drop, you're gonna have a lot of time just sitting around there, which is kind of, I'd rather get somewhere early and sit around than try to time it so that I get in there right at the last minute. So I just ended up finding a dry place to sit and I sat there for a while. I was sitting on concrete and that made my butt a little bit cold. So I would recommend bring some sort of towel as some of your morning throwaway layers that you could sit on, something with a little bit of a pad and something that could absorb and serve as a buffer between the coldness of whatever you're sitting on and yourself. There were plenty of bathrooms. I didn't find myself needing to wait in line for very long to be able to use one. I didn't need to use the bathroom like as we got later in the morning though, so I don't know if the line started to get longer, but when I wanted to use the bathroom, it was a very quick affair. I ended up getting into the green area kind of right when it opened at 5 a.m. So I was a bit on the early side. And then I think it was almost an hour before I could get into my C corral. Now, as you go from the green kind of waiting area into your corrals, note that there are bathrooms in the waiting area, but there are no bathrooms when you get into the corral. So they're kind of doing it similar to a way they do it in New York, although in New York there are bathrooms once you get into the corral. So that's a big difference there. I feel like that took a lot of people by surprise because there was a lot of peeing in public happening once we got into the corrals. I guess that also happens a lot in New York as well. Anything that you have worn with you, you're going to be throwing it away or throwing it to the side. There are bins where you can kind of drop everything off as you get into the corral, but there's going to be a lot of time. If the corral C opened at 5:50, the race didn't start till 6:30, so it was 40 more minutes before race started, so you're going to want to hold on to your throwaway layers. There wasn't a lot of room to be like warming up and running around in there. I wasn't planning on doing much of a warm-up that morning for the race that I wanted to run, so if you do want to do that, you're going to want to kind of do some of that jogging before you get into the corrals. But we weren't like super tightly packed in there. It wasn't the most uncomfortable kind of corral waiting experience. I'd say probably Berlin is the most crowded one that I've ever experienced. So for the most part, things were really chill pre-race. Let's talk a little bit right now about pacers, and we'll do a kind of very broad course overview. Now, there are a lot of pacers for this race. Sydney Marathon is really proud of how many different pace groups they offer. I think the fastest pace group is, I think, 250, and then they go every 5-minute increment until you get to 4 hours. And then at 4 hours, there's a pace group every 10 minutes, although there's also pacers at 4:15 and 4:45. And then after 5 hours to 7 hours, it's every 30 minutes that there is a pace group. So there's plenty of pace groups that are available for you to be able to latch onto. And I, in my race briefing that my tour group had, the guy that's in charge of the pacers came and talked to us for a little bit. And he said that all the pacers are supposed to run by even effort, not necessarily even split. So this is a pretty hilly course. So keep that in mind, that they are going to be running even effort. So that way at the end, it'll add up to that desired goal time by the end. But every 5K split isn't going to be like pro rata even necessarily. Although he said the way that the course is laid out, it ends up kind of being the same 5K split for each time. And they're pretty strict with their pacers. They have to hit each goal 5K split along the entire course within a very small window. Otherwise, they won't be invited to come back and pace again. So I feel like the pacers are a group you can trust here in Sydney Marathon. They helped me to come in right under my goal at the end of this race. So I would recommend relying a lot on them, especially for me, because right when the race started for me, the strap on my GPS watch broke. So I didn't really have a lot of ways of knowing if I was on the right pace if it wasn't for the pace group. Now, in broad strokes, I'll say that this is a net downhill course, but so is Boston. There's 313 meters of elevation gain, and that's kind of like the headline item. And there's 386 meters of elevation loss. That's 83 meters of loss, or 1,027 feet up and 1,300 feet down, for a 272-foot net loss. But it is a hilly course, and when you look at the course profile, it looks really intimidating, and it is a tough course. But I like to think of it as 3 big hills with 2 notable, also kind of big hills. The 3 big hills that I'll talk about are right at about the 14 or 15K mark going up Oxford Street. The second one is going to be going into the park. Going into the park happens at about 26K. And the third one is going to be coming up after Mrs. Macquarie's chair. That is the worst one. And it comes right at the 39K mark. So it's about as late as you can have a really big climb without it being a complete uphill finish. As far as hydration station goes, there's 16 stations throughout the course. So it's not like every mile, but it's more than every other mile. The first station is going to be Powerade and water. And then after that, it alternates Powerade and water or just water. There's a couple of stations throughout the course that also give out nutrition, but it's goos. So I didn't really pay much attention to when or where those were. So now that we've gone over the overview of the course, let's go over things in a little bit of a closer amount of detail. When I run marathons, I like to split things up into 5K blocks. So that's what we're going to do here. Taking a look at the map route isn't the prettiest course on paper, but when you're actually running it, it is quite gorgeous. Let's take a look at the elevation profile really quickly, and it looks really intimidating here, but it doesn't run quite like this elevation profile looks. I'm not trying to make you think that there aren't going to be hills and that this course isn't hard, but it's not as daunting as like this elevation profile looks. So let's take a look at the first 5K. For this first 5K, it's really downhill from the start. There's a little bit of a flat as you get out of the starting gate, but then it quickly starts dropping. The elevation is a lot like Boston Marathon, where everyone tells you it's downhill, and then when you actually run it, you're surprised at just how downhill it is. If you've run LA Marathon, it's probably closer to that, just an extreme amount of downhill. This first little blip up that you see looks really intense, and it is a decent amount of gain, but you're running up Harbor Bridge and you just have a beautiful view of it as you're approaching it, and you don't really notice how big it is. It's very similar to how you're starting out New York Marathon, where you're running up the Verrazano Bridge, where it is something that your body will feel, so take it easy there. Now to your left will be the Opera House, but it might be a little bit hard to see from where you're going to be running on the bridge. So if you can't see it, don't worry, there's plenty of other times that you're going to be able to see it. Once you hit the crest of the bridge, there's a lot of downhill as you not only go down the bridge, and so anything that you did to go up the bridge, you get to have on the way back down, but there's even more downhill after that. And then you start hitting some rollers after that first 5K. And so this area through here looks, again, pretty intense. And again, you'll feel it and notice it, but there's kind of like a lot of tight turns in that area. Everyone's still really packed up. There's a lot of good energy. There's some nervous energy, but there's a lot of good energy in that second 5K. But to me, overall, the feeling that I had from it was that it was rolling. I got a little bit ahead of the pacers here at this point too. I feel like just energy is really high, especially after you're coming slamming down the hill. You're probably going a little bit faster than you should have. So just use the rollers to kind of slow you down and get you into a rhythm for the rest of the race. After you hit the 10K mark, that's when it flattens out for just a little bit. I think that's where you start to get some of the best views of the Opera House until the finish line. You're gonna go underneath the Harbor Bridge there too, so it's really nice. In that area, the roads get a little bit windy, and everyone's gonna be tempted to kind of run along the curves of the road. If you can, try and run the tangents, but at this point, it's still really crowded in the race, so you might just have to kind of go with the flow. And then in that third 5K from 10K to 15K, that's where I think things really start to get a little bit noticeable in terms of some elevation gain. None of the hills are really like incredibly painful though. Just everything feels really sustained. And I'm not sure if it's this hill or this hill going up to Oxford Street. I think it was this hill in the middle. This sustained hill is the one that I really noticed. And that's the one that I was like, oh, there's a lot of uphill climbing here. From 15K to 20K, it feels like it's kind of mostly flat. There's a little bit of a downhill grade to it overall, but it's a nice place where you can really start to feel like, all right, we've conquered the first hill of this race. Now it's time to kind of really try and get into a nice rhythm here. At the about 18K mark or so, that's when you hit this section here. That's a little bit of an out and back. We could take a look at it on the map over here too. to, and that is this little section right here, just this little little finger onto Daisy Avenue. I felt a slight uphill grade. It was noticeable, but it wasn't a big deal. But you do get that grade right back. That's the only hairpin turn on the course. It does look like there's a lot of really sharp turns on the course, but that's the only one that really struck me as being like, oh, this is really tight, kind of like the turns are in the Tokyo Marathon if you've run that one. And then at the 20K mark, then you hit like another out and back, if you want to look at it that way. On the map, it's kind of this really long stretch where you're going to the southernmost part of the route. And so this is just one really long out and back here. And again, to me, it feels like there's mostly a slight uphill grade as you're going through this section. But again, you're going to get it right back on the back end of it. Here is where I saw a lot of my friends either on the way out or on the way back. So that helps keep things entertaining. Watch the tangents on this section. It's not super twisty, but the road is really wide. And this is where people tend to want to spread out a little bit more. This takes you past the halfway mark as well. So like this area from like 20 to 25K, that's a really important part of the course where I feel like you can really start to establish a rhythm. And I think at this point, this is the part where you're going to know if this is going to be a really good day for you or not. If you can get yourself into a really nice rhythm, you're going to have a good day. If you're already struggling by this point, you're going to have to make some adjustments, I think. But this is the part where people might be tempted to pick it up a little bit, and I'm not sure that that's bad advice. Normally I wouldn't suggest pushing at this early of a stage in the race, but I feel like this area is nice and open, and it's really great for just doing some rhythm running. So you could hit the southernmost part of the course and start to head back. And even though this does look like a hairpin turn, you're going from like two one-way streets, so like you're kind of crossing over into the way back, and so there's plenty of room to make that turn. It just feels like you're making a couple of turns. It doesn't feel like a U-turn. And then once you hit the 25K mark, after that, that's where you start to hit some more hills. So like we had one out and back here, that little finger out and back, and then you had the big out and back over here. And then after that, after it flattens out a little bit, that's when you start to see what I think is the second big hill of the course. And again, I think that this is the hill leading up to Centennial Park, but it's not technically Centennial Park. I think it's actually Moore Park that you're getting into, but regardless of what it's called, you're not making any turns. You're still going straight along this long road. And right here is when it starts to become uphill, 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 uphill until you make that turn to get into the park. And again, it looks like it's a hairpin turn there. It's sharp, but it's not like a super tight turn. There's plenty of room to make that turn in there. And there's a lot of crowd support right here at this section over here. That's probably one of the densest crowd support areas other than the start or the finish line. But the energy is just so good through here. And then after you make that turn, you start to hit the downhill coming in through here, coming down onto Driver Ave. And then you hit like, I think what I would call like the third out and back, but it's not really an out and back. You're just making this little lollipop loop over here. And so this lollipop loop through Centennial Park, it feels like it's a little bit rolling, but I think looking at the map, what it is as you go out and go east to the farthest part of the park, it's kind of gradually up, 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 up. And then as you're coming back, you're getting a lot of that grade back. But all throughout here, throughout the park, there's just a lot of really good energy through Centennial Park and through this adjacent park, which is Moore Park, but all just kind of feels like one big park area. And so that part was for me the most fun part of the course because I saw just the most people and got the most crowd support. So here's the part where you're going up, 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 up to Moore Park, and that's the second big hill of the race. Then you're coming down until actual Centennial Park here, and I think that's what this is, kind of the gradual grade up and then the gradual grade down as you're making that loop. And then you ran a big uphill to get into the park, and it's kind of like a little bit of a bowl, and then you have to run back out the bowl to get up to this point here, which is where the Moore Park label is on this. But I think that's like kind of like right around here as you're leaving Moore Park, that's where that label is. And then at that point, it looks like it's a lot of downhill right here in this little stretch where the Moore Park label is, but to me it just felt very flat, and this section just felt like it was so long, like 34 to like 37K felt like the longest section of the course. Like there weren't kilometer markers every kilometer. There was like every 5 kilometers there was a marker, and then there was also a clock. But I feel like at 35K they started having a kilometer marker every kilometer. So every time I saw a sign I was like, oh great, another sign. But it was only a kilometer and not 5 kilometers. So it was really kind of, I'm glad that they had them there, and I wasn't confused. I didn't think that I'd really run another 5K, but it was just kind of like, I ran for so long and it was just another kilometer. So it felt like the kilometers were really long. And then here is right around here somewhere is when you hit that part where you're at, what's it called? Flinders Street meets Oxford Street. And so you start coming down this really big hill. And that's another hill actually that you do notice this one, and it feels really good. There's a lot of really good energy at the start of Oxford Street, all the way as you get back towards kind of Hyde Park and the CBD area. And that's really, really nice. You're also going to see a lot of other racers coming up the other way on the other side of that hill as you're making this really, really pleasant downhill stretch. And then here we get to kind of like what I think is the worst part of the course, like 38 to 41K is just really tough. There's this little hill to get up to, there's like a church that you see up there as you get from like the bottom of Hyde Park up towards kind of where you enter the botanical garden. And that hill isn't that big, but at that point you had been running downhill for a really long time, and then now you have this little stinger going uphill. That's the big hill that I thought we were getting at the end of the race, but no, there was a downhill, and then as we got close to Miss Macquarie's chair, so you're getting into like a little peninsula that juts out into the harbor. Really, really nice downhill going through the park. Then you hit the big hill, and this is what I think is like hill number 3. That is really big and super defeating at this point of the course. I saw a lot of people walking. I saw a lot of people pulled off to the side, and I'm like, we're at like almost 40K at this point. You got to keep going, but I'm also like, but I understand. That hill just felt really tough at this point of the race. The sun's been up a lot longer at this point. There wasn't any cloud cover left, so it was starting to get a little bit warmer. So I felt like at this point of the race, it's really starting to wear on people. And then as you're leaving that park in the botanical garden, you turn and there's still more hills. So as we look at this map here, you come down, this is as you come into the park, this section right here by Hyde Park, that's that little stinger uphill, and then it goes downhill, down, 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 down. You make this turn and it's all the way up, and you turn and leave the park, and there's still more up until you hit this water station, and that's finally when you hit that final crest, and then you get to hit that beautiful downhill. It's almost a little bit too much downhill. You're doing a little bit of braking, but open the legs up to the extent you can. It's gonna feel like your legs are gonna give out and you're gonna collapse at any moment, but you know what? You're at like 41.5 Ks of the marathon. That's how it's gonna feel, downhill or not. And then you hit at the bottom of that hill, the final stretch of the course. And then as you turn a little bit, that's when you see the Opera House. Again, they allow the public all along kind of like the finish line and the finishing chute, which makes it very different than a lot of other world major marathons where kind of like the best parts by the finish line, it's all like either ticketed stands and bleachers and or friends and family and like sponsors only. So, but this is a place where you can get really close right up to the finish line. And then as you cross through the line, you're right there on the Opera House steps. And the public is right there, able to watch you and cheer for you as you come in. Again, a really unique experience. After the finish line, there is a bit of a walk through to get from the finish line to where you can meet up with your family. I got my medal and I got my kind of goodie bag with, I think there was some fruit in there, water, Powerade, and maybe a granola bar or something was in there. and then you keep moving through. As they're still funneling you through, a lot of people are stopping to take selfies. The one thing that I thought was unusual about this is that there's still a long time between the finish line and where baggage check is. And so there isn't like a Mylar blanket or any sort of cover up that they give you after the race. I know I was getting chilly as I was walking through or hobbling through after finishing, and I thought that that was kind of an interesting thing that wasn't there. The thing that stinks about the way that this race finishes is the finish line view is amazing, but as you walk around and try to get out of the park to leave, to go get bags, it's uphill. To get out of the park, it's uphill, up a bunch of stairs. So that's kind of not ideal, but you know what? It's not like you're any sort of time crunch at that point. So hobble up the stairs as slowly as you want. It's job well done, and just enjoy the day. I had a great time running this race, and it was fantastic weather. So that's pretty much all of my thoughts, I think, that I have so far for the Sydney Marathon in terms of the information that I was able to acquire while I was there in Sydney's first year as a marathon major. I thought Sydney did a really good job. It was a world-class event, organized extremely well. Not that many hiccups, which I think is spectacular given the fact that it's the first year that they're having this many people come to their city to run the race. Sydney is an intensely fanatic running town. It has great running culture. I really enjoyed running there. I hope to run in Sydney and in Australia again sometime soon. Hopefully you have as good a time when you go to Sydney as I did.
Yo, what's going on?